Hi, fourth grade. Today we're learning about how to classify quadrilaterals. So just like we learned to classify triangles, we're going to be working on classifying quadrilaterals. So if we look at the word quadrilateral, we see two words that we've already learned before. First, we see quad, which when we think about what quad means, we can think about maybe the thing that we can ride with four wheels. Or if you go to the university campus, they have the quad. It has four sides. So anything with quad, quad means four, okay? And then we have lateral, right? So lateral is like side. So we have four-sided shapes, okay? Now, if we look at these shapes, these are all quadrilaterals, okay? And in all of these quadrilaterals, the sides labeled A and B are adjacent to each other. So this side A and this side, oops, that's B, and this side B are adjacent to each other, okay? A, B, and then A, B. So if we look at that and we think what would make an adjacent side, we would say, well, it looks like they're next to each other. And then they come together and they touch and create a vertex. So that's important to understand. So we would say, for number one, what do you think it means for two sides to be adjacent? We would say that they touch. And form a vertex. Okay. Then if we look what other sides are adjacent to each other, we would notice they already give us A and B and B and C. Okay. But C and D are also adjacent to each other, just as D and A are adjacent to each other. So they all come together and create a vertex. And there's no requirement on the angle that they create, but it's just that they come together, they touch, and they create a vertex. So they're next to each other. So we would say A and D, and then I'll put this slash to show the difference. C and D. Those are all adjacent sides. In all of the quadrilaterals, and we'll scroll up in a second to look at them again, the sides labeled A and C are opposite to each other. So if we look at this green one, this green rectangle, A and C are opposite to each other. So we'll notice that they don't touch, okay? And all of these shapes, it's important that you see, all of these shapes are created out of line segments. So these lines, they all stop at a certain point. They don't continue on and on forever. So if we look at line A and C here, even though if they continued on the path that they're on, eventually they would touch, because we're making these figures out of line segments, they will never touch. And they're on opposite sides of each other, okay? So what do you think it means for two sides to be opposite each other? It means that to be opposite is to be across and that they won't touch. So to be across from each other and do not touch. Okay. And then what other sides are opposite each other? So we have A and B, or sorry, A and C. So if we look closely, we'll see that B and D are also opposite each other. And same here, B and D, B and D, and then again B and D. They're all opposite each other, so they'll never touch. C and D. Okay. Now, this page is super important. So if we were together, I would be passing out sticky notes so that you can put a sticky note on this page. It's very important for a good bit of the rest of our chapter. So make sure that you continue to use this page as we continue to classify quadrilaterals. So it says some quadrilaterals are special because they have parallel sides or right angles. We already know about rectangles and squares. Other types of quadrilaterals are trapezoids, parallelograms, and rhombus. So using this chart, we look carefully at the different things that classify quadrilaterals. So all of these shapes on this page are quadrilaterals. They all have four sides, okay? And it tells you four sides. And then because they have four sides, they have four angles. They go together. But then we have different, smaller, more specific classifications of quadrilaterals. So within quadrilaterals, we have parallelograms and trapezoids. Trapezoids, okay, they have four sides, they're quadrilaterals, and exactly one pair of opposite sides that are parallel. And in these trapezoids, it's these two sides, okay? Your trapezoid can also be on the side like this. Oh, that's not parallel, is it? It would be like that, okay? Fix that up. Okay, or you can even have right angles in a trapezoid. And the two parallel sides would be this side and this side. So just pay close attention to the parallel sides and the number of parallel sides, and that'll tell you which side you would go with these two categories. Now, for parallelograms, there's lots of things that fit under parallelograms, so you'll need to pay close attention to the different clues that were given by either the shape or the words that describe the shape. So for a parallelogram, there's four sides and two pairs of opposite sides that are parallel. So for example, we have this one, and then we have this one and this one. That's how we get our two pairs, okay? Now, when we look even further, we have a rhombus. A rhombus has four sides and two pairs of opposite sides that are parallel, but it also has four equal sides. So it would be like the same maybe as like an equilateral triangle. So all of these sides, and we can show that by having our little tick marks, those are all equal length, okay? Now a rectangle, if you look on the other side here, four sides, two pairs of opposite sides that are parallel, and four right angles. Not necessarily four equal sides, but must have four right angles. And we can mark that by a right angle marker. Now, when we look at squares, this is the very most specific quadrilateral that we're working with. It has four sides, it's a quadrilateral, two pairs of opposite sides that are parallel, it's a parallelogram, four right angles, and four equal sides. So it's like a combination of these two put into one quadrilateral. So again, you really want to make sure that this page is something that you use to help you with this lesson and then continuing on. All right, so we're going to draw special quadrilaterals and name them. On our Google Classroom, I've put up what we worked on with Zoom. So I'm just going to have examples. Your quadrilaterals don't have to look the same in the drawing here, but they do have to have the exact correct name because there's very specific names. So when we have a quadrilateral that has exactly one pair of opposite sides that are parallel, we look up here, exactly one pair of opposite sides that are parallel. And the only one that matches that is a trapezoid. So we'll go back down here, write the word trapezoid, and then we will draw our trapezoid. All right. Now our next one, draw a quadrilateral that has two pairs of opposite sides that are parallel. Two pairs of opposite sides that are parallel. That's the only clue that they give us. So we can draw anything underneath this category, okay? So there's many different options, and you need to include all of them. We could have a square. We could have a rectangle. We could have a rhombus. And we can have a parallelogram. So just make sure that you have those four options, because those are all options that we could have for number 6. And then you can draw whichever one of those you'd like, and then just make sure you label it at the top so that we know, you can remember which one you drew. Okay, number 7. Draw a quadrilateral that has two pairs of opposite sides that are parallel, 4 equal sides, and no right angles. So we're going to go back up here, and we're going to look. 2 pairs of opposite sides that are parallel, so we're in parallelograms. It has 4 equal sides, so it's going to be probably either a rhombus or a square. And then it says no right angles, so now it can't be a square. It must be a rhombus. So we'll go back down, and we will write rhombus. And then I would highly recommend that you use a ruler to double check the length of your rhombus, because I can't guarantee that has equal sides, and that's really important that you make sure that you have equal sides on your rhombus. Okay, now 8, 9, and 10 we just talked through. So we want to explain why each statement is true. So number 8 says a rhombus is always a parallelogram, but a parallelogram isn't always a rhombus. Well, if we look back, a rhombus has 4 sides, which a parallelogram also has. It has 2 pairs of opposite sides that are parallel, which is important to being a parallelogram. But a rhombus also has 4 equal sides. But not all rhombuses, or not all parallelograms, have 4 equal sides. So a rhombus is always a parallelogram, but a parallelogram does not have to have 4 equal sides to be a parallelogram, which is why a parallelogram is not always a rhombus. Number 9, a rectangle is a parallelogram, but a parallelogram is not necessarily a rectangle. So a rectangle fits under the category of a parallelogram, 2 pairs of opposite sides that are parallel. But a rectangle must have 4 right angles, and not all parallelograms have 4 right angles. And number 10, a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle does not have to be a square. Remember, a square has to have 4 right angles and 4 sides that are equal to each other. But a rectangle does not have to have 4 equal sides. It has to have 4 right angles, but does not have to have 4 equal sides. So that's why all of those statements are true, and just work through and use page 302 to help you describe why those are true statements. Now for number 11, we're using all of these words here and putting them into our little chart here to kind of help us remember what's what and what's important to having quadrilaterals. So first we're going to look at what all of these shapes are, and they are all quadrilateral. So we're going to put quadrilateral here because inside this box are all quadrilaterals. They're all 4-sided shapes. Now, we'll check this one off. Now we know that a trapezoid has 4 sides, but has exactly 1 pair of opposite sides that are parallel, and there's nothing else that goes with it. So we're going to put trapezoid over here because that's where it goes. It's unique. It goes all by itself. cross off trapezoid. Now, a parallelogram is the next biggest category. So if we look here, inside this circle is our next biggest category. So we're going to put parallelogram here because we have the rest of these that fit inside a parallelogram definition. So then we have two things and then one thing that has common attributes from both of those items. So first, let's look at rectangle. We'll just go down the line here. A rectangle has 4 right angles. It has 4 sides, so it's a quadrilateral, and it has 2 pairs of opposite sides that are parallel, so it's a parallelogram. So we're going to put it here because it doesn't share anything with anything else. So rectangle. Okay, cross that one off. And then rhombus. Now a rhombus has 4 sides. It has 2 pairs of opposite sides that are parallel, and it has 4 sides that are equal. So it doesn't share anything with a rectangle, so we're going to put it over here, rhombus. Now we look at a square. A square has 4 sides. It has 2 pairs of opposite sides that are parallel. It has 4 right angles, which is what a rectangle has, but it also has 4 sides that are equal. So because it shares one part of a rectangle and one part of a rhombus, it goes in the middle. That is, again, the most specific shape, the most specific quadrilateral that we're working with so far. Okay, so that's how our little diagram works here. And then on the next page, 304A, you have shapes that you can cut out and sort. You don't need to cut them out. You don't need to glue or sort, but it's a little helpful to make to move some shapes around and understand the difference between a square and a rectangle, or the difference between a rectangle and a rhombus, and it might help you to cut them out and play with those shapes. And again, you don't need to cut the shapes out. You can just cut the squares and it'll be a little bit faster. So let me know if you have any questions. Check our Google Classroom for any answers that you might need, and I'll see you soon.